Welcome back. I'm Christopher Taylor, Sovereign Harmony, and I am back outside again this month. Here it is, early April. Today is April 5th. It's Friday afternoon. I'm here in the Boulevard Park section of Midtown Sacramento. My home. I like to refer to it as my sacred grove. Kind of like a druid walking around my bare feet. Just kind of enjoying the green grass. Springtime, basically. So, anyway, let's do an update on April. Okay, I'll talk a little bit about the energies as well as the astrology, and bring that in, of course, like I always do. So I'm kind of back in the same spot. I enjoyed this spot last time in March, if you saw that, and so I thought it'd be nice to come back to this area. And just to update you, really funny, I mentioned in that March one, if you remember, about a random synchronicity with a practitioner that was coming in from San Francisco, and how I had a potential to meet this person, okay? And what happened was, not only was he coming through Sacramento that Sunday of that weekend, March, I believe, 8th, 9th, 10th, whatever that was, I think it was the 10th, but there was 4 places that I could have met him, and the place where I live right over here, just to the left of that street here, a couple buildings down, and this building right here in the corner. There's a yoga studio in the bottom. Upstairs is this alternative healing, massage therapy kind of place, and I was able to schedule something right there, walking distance. So, synchronicity. When it rains, it pours. So speaking about raining, pouring, it's April showers. So I want to talk about what's going to be showering on us here in April, energetically speaking. And so, why don't I just kind of start out with some of the astrology that's going on right now. So right as we speak, today again is Friday afternoon here in Sacramento. It's about, 4:30 in the afternoon, West Coast time, and it's pretty nice out. It's supposed to be like the mid-80s by next week. Anyway, but right now, and starting last night, so the evening of Thursday, April 4th, right on through, it's going to last right until early morning Tuesday, April 8th, West Coast time. And so that's a good 4.5 day period of Mars and Venus joining together, okay? So Mars and Venus only join up about once every 2 years, roughly speaking, okay? So it is relatively, I don't want to call it too rare, but it hasn't happened. Let's say the last time it happened was actually back in May of 2011. So it was about May 18th or 19th to the 25th or 26th, something like that kind of time span. And this time we're getting a little bit of a quicker time span, on the 4th to the 8th of April, but it's the same kind of energy of Venus and Mars. And if you're, at least somewhat familiar with Venus and Mars energy, this is the feminine and masculine. We all have feminine and masculine nature embedded in us, and this is the kind of opportunity to plug in and plant seeds for that balance, okay? So whenever we see Mars and Venus getting together, we don't have one dominating over the other. We have a blending of those energies. So this is like our left side is our feminine side, our right side is the masculine. It's a chance to blend our energies, okay? When this occurred back in May of 2011, we were planting seeds that were going to last up until about now. So, and so what did we plant then? Some people keep diaries, some people don't. I always recommend it because it's great to look back and see what you were doing. And astrology is crazy, the way timing works out. You don't even know you're in the middle of something, and then you realize how significant it was in retrospect, and what was going on. So, like for me, for example, this meeting in Taurus last 2 Mays ago, in 2011, almost 2 years ago, this occurred in the early part of Taurus, okay? Whereas this one that's occurring right now as we speak, and that will peak Saturday night, kind of overnight Saturday into Sunday, this one's going to occur in Aries, okay? A little bit different. We'll talk about that in a second. But the one that occurred in Taurus 2 years ago, in May of 2011, this one, Taurus is an energy that's kind of like grounded. It's kind of like I'm sitting on the earth here. Very earthy energy, very grounded, very practical, very physical, okay? Taurus energy. And so what we were planting back then was more of a physical and permanent kind of creative expression, okay? Because we're blending our masculine and feminine, that's our creative flow, and it's literally flow, and it's like, and I always like to think of it as like the second chakra, if you're familiar, and that's kind of down around the belly button area of the body, and this is where our flow is, our play, this is our dancing. When we're stiff there, that's when we can't dance. Loosening up that area, the hips, that's kind of, this is where sexuality comes into dancing, sexuality, it's all related to this creativity, okay? And that's the, I look at it, I actually link it to a copper zinc balance within the body, but I won't get into that. That's more the stuff I'm writing about in the books that I have coming along the way. But the copper zinc profile, and the copper zinc ratio, I think, and I've just in my own learnings about my own health and everything, I've come up, it's pretty interesting, but we'll get to that, like I said, at some other point, not here, not today. But Mars, Venus balancing that second chakra, it was in Taurus, it was very earthy as well. So whatever we established for a creative expression in mid to late May in 2011, it's something that's going to stick with us, okay? It's interesting, like just for example, the Mars-Venus conjunction in early Taurus for me is in my 8th house. There's 12 houses in astrology, if you're not familiar. The 8th house is this house of like healing, and going deep to the wounds and letting go, things of that kind of like deeper nature, okay? It's related to Scorpio energy and Pluto energy, if you're familiar with that. But so for me, and what I started back then was I actually started seeing an acupuncturist, okay? So there's a healing modality, and acupuncture is physical, sticking needles physically into your body. So it really does relate to this idea of physical healing, okay? And I established that at that point. And what's interesting too is that what acupuncture does is it helps you reestablish flow in your body, okay? There's that masculine, feminine, Venus, Mars kind of joining together again. So it very much was along that theme. But in any case, that was kind of the latest practice. I began that when that was active, it was the week I started acupuncture, okay? And it really improved my health quite a bit. I wish I was still doing it. It's a little bit expensive. I had to stop. But it's a great benefit. It really just gets your organs flowing, because acupuncture isn't woo-woo out there. It's pretty it's pretty logical in how it works in terms of electrical stimulation and where organs work in our nervous system and all that. So it makes a lot of sense that kind of was what I experienced. So it depends on where the Mars Venus was in your chart, just like it will depend on where the Mars Venus is in your chart now. The 8th house is also, this meeting of the two is at about early 20 something degrees of Aries, the one that we're talking about right now, whereas the one 2 years ago was in like about 6 or 7 degrees Taurus, around that area. So they're not too far off from each other, and in my case, in my personal chart, it happens in my 8th house again, okay? So we might be dealing in my life with another healing kind of modality starting, and it's interesting because, as an example, this guy I met with, almost immediately after that, a week later, someone that follows me on Facebook in my posts, who's a cranial sacral therapist, and I was, this is what this guy kind of was related to, the technique that he did with me in my nervous system, and she just offered me a service just to try it out, and I'm just stunned, like, oh, that big surprise, and I just said yes and did it. And in that meeting, and it was a very, very powerful session. First of all, very powerful. It lingered for a couple of days, as far as like energy in my head, trying to get back into balance and everything. But in any case, whether or not I go back and see her might be irrelevant. It's funny because she mentioned something in that session that I brushed off, because I've been on a healing journey for over a decade. I've tried everything. I've gone every angle, everything. And what she mentioned was this probiotic, this particular probiotic that she used. If you're not familiar with probiotics, here we are dealing with the colon, especially, with the intestines in general, and the balance of flora. Flora is like the bacteria, the natural bacteria and fungus. They have to be, it's not about killing that stuff. It's about getting it in balance to help our digestion, because they're kind of a part of a team in our body, the way they work together when they're in balance. Okay, and so we're talking about this second chakra, which rules the colon, which is again, and we're talking about balance. We're talking about Venus and Mars. So it's funny because I started it today. I got it in the mail yesterday, and I started that probiotic today. And like I said, at first I brushed it off. I said, no, I'm not trying another probiotic. I've done probiotics. They don't work. They don't, at least, they don't help. Like acupuncture really helped me. But like probiotic, I haven't really found one that really helps. But I basically she reminded me again later in the second time around. It just kind of felt like, whatever. Let's take a couple of drops of probiotic. What can it hurt? Why not? I started it today. And then I was laughing because I forgot that this was the Venus-Mars initiation, and that it's in my 8th house of healing. I was like, well, okay. So who knows? Maybe I'm starting a new balance. But the creative energy, the pulse of energy this time around for all of us is in Aries. Okay? Aries is the first sign of the zodiac. It is the baby of the zodiac. It is the initiation point. It's when the sun enters Aries, which is the spring equinox. Here we just had it. March 21st or so, March 20th, 21st. Every year it happens around that time. That's when the sun enters Aries relative to the Earth. Okay? And that marks the new year, astrologically. That's when we start a new cycle, okay? And there's a lot of energy in Aries right now. There's a lot of newness going on. March was, again, in review, all about just surrendering and letting go and allowing the realities of how we've stumped ourselves in relationships just come to fore, and right in front of our face, so we can basically say, no more, never again, And in some cases, we were learning about, I always thought I was fill in the blank, whatever my job was or my duty was. Now I realize I'm not, I've always been doing that for others, but that's not really me, These kind of awarenesses, okay? Like, for example, just the other night, I impulsively decided to, right down the street here, just past this building actually, a couple blocks down, there is a comedy club, the Sacramento comedy spot, okay? It's been sitting there, I've been living over here for 7 years. That's been there for at least, I'd say 3 or 4, maybe more of those years, about half the time I've been here. And I've had thoughts of, going ahead and just trying it out. When I moved to California 12 years ago, I moved here in 2001. I graduated college spring of 2001. I had intentions of getting into comedy on some level. I even researched the comedy clubs in Sacramento because I was going to UC Davis, which is 20 minutes outside of Sacramento. So it was on my mind. It wasn't just in the back of my mind. It was near the front of my mind. Not something completely out of left field. So what's really interesting is it went on the back burner. I kind of wanted to get serious about life, get my graduate degree and everything, and then I just kind of forgot about it, And as my health has deteriorated, and I can't really find that physical solution, and so many people or so many healers have told me, the psychosomatic component of it is this sort of squashing, self-squashing that I tend to do with creativity. And lo and behold, here we are with this Venus-Mars launching kind of period, and we're going to have a new moon in Aries here on Wednesday the 10th. So right after this Venus-Mars is setting it up, we get a new moon, which is the launching point, and it's a launching point in the sign of Aries, the young sign of Aries, the new beginning. And anyway, I went to this improv class just to try it out on Wednesday. Oh my God! And I couldn't believe how much I just felt the flow of me again. And when I say me again, I mean like me when I was clowning around in high school, college, and enjoying myself, enjoying life without having to get so serious, being a serious adult, and everything. So I felt like a kid again, and it was awesome. That Aries energy, I felt like a kid. It was great. And they have a class starting up, an 8-week class this week on the 9th, actually, so right around, like within hours of the new moon. In fact, because the new moon happens early morning Wednesday, this will be like Tuesday evening. So we're talking within hours of this new moon in Aries, and right after I'm starting, right after this Mars-Venus thing goes on here this weekend, this new, just fun thing, just an 8-week class on basic improv skills. So I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be fun. I don't know if this is going to be what just busts me loose, essentially. It allows my energy to flow again and gets my body back into tip-top shape. Because I'm ready to go. I got all kinds of ideas in the hopper, and I'm ready to go, and I don't want to be as tired as I've been the last several years, or as restricted in my diet and things like that. But anyway, we're all on our own journey. But in any case, this Mars-Venus conjunction in Aries is very important to just focus on where we're directing our creative energies right now, because we're going to be launching this new moon here Wednesday, and so for the next couple of weeks, the whole basically first couple of weeks of April, the first 10 to 20 days of April, we're looking at this new moon influence. So we're starting anew, based on what we let go of in March, what we've realized about ourselves, these epiphanies that came to us here in late March, and what we're going to do about it. Okay. And so this is an important time for planting some seeds. This whole period from right now, here today again April 5th, right on through the first couple of weeks of April with this new moon in Aries as well, to plant these seeds. And in addition to that, we have Mercury retrograde, which is ending its shadow period. It was retrograde most of the end of February to mid-March, and it lingers in its shadow for a couple of weeks later. And the shadow actually ends here, it's Friday, actually early tomorrow morning, Saturday morning. Mercury finishes up its shadow, which means that all the review we've been doing, and it was retrograde in Pisces, so wherever Pisces is in your chart, it was about 5 or 6 degrees Pisces and 19 degrees Pisces, around that range. So that area of your chart, wherever that is, that's where you were reviewing, okay? And now we're done reviewing, ready to move forward, okay? In addition, Jupiter, which basically started some aspects back in late summer, like July, August of 2012, is finishing up its shadow, or should I say, finishing up its kind of swath of its retrograde here in April. Okay, so the month of April will also be finishing up the Jupiter work. Jupiter is a lot like Mercury, it has to do with information. Okay, but more larger scale information. And since Jupiter's been in Gemini has to do it's the sign that Mercury actually rules, so it has to do with information and everything else. I've been talking about all the secrets coming out, and this is personal secrets, things about ourselves that we didn't realize coming out into fruition. We're finishing up that stuff right now, and we're ready to move on with it, okay? And on a larger scale, all that stuff is coming out too. I alluded to the potential for a false flag here in late March, early April. Here we are, it's early April. You might be wondering, well, where's that false flag? Right now, in the back of my mind, I'm looking at this North Korea thing. Also note the Monsanto thing if you didn't catch that as well. In North Korea, I think it's pretty obvious all over the news. In my opinion, I think this is a distraction. It's a distraction from something else. In my opinion, I think it's the collapse of the dollar on the horizon. Okay, too much deeper into that. That's what I think. I think it's going to happen sooner than later. Sooner as within the next year or so. But I think there's almost like this distraction. I mean, how serious can it be that North Korea is actually threatening us? That would be one of the dumbest moves anyone could ever make, considering how many people would have our back, how many more nuclear arms the U.S. has. It's an outrageous threat. It's an outrageous perceived threat, I should say. To even if they were serious, it's an easy fix, I guess is my point. It's a matter of just saying, okay, well, you're gonna be blown off the map if that happens. Not that I'm an advocate of war or anything, but North Korea pretty much wouldn't stand a chance. So the fact that this is even being made a big deal seems kind of sketchy to me. Okay, I think it's a distraction. Okay, the Monsanto thing, if you didn't see this, just came out. There was Obama signed his new executive order, and essentially what this executive order does is it exempts companies like Monsanto. Monsanto is like the main company in charge of most of our food industry, the big big corporations that control food and that love to do the genetically modified forms of food, which is almost like making food not food anymore on some level. And in many ways, these aren't tested, etc. So, in my opinion, genetically modified foods, I'd want to avoid them if I can. And I think as Americans, as freedom, we should have at least a choice to avoid them if we want. Whether or not they're regulated, we should know when we're dealing with them and be able to choose between natural foods or organic or GMO or whatever. It should be our choice. But what this order does is it kind of exempts these companies, these big companies, from being regulated federally. There's a loophole in there that they can take advantage of with this executive order. Whether or not Obama or the main members of the administration really are clear about that is, who knows. But the point is, this is just another example of the collusion of government and big corporations. And as we all know, that is the definition of fascism. Fascism is what we were introduced to, say, around World War II with like the National Socialist Party or Nazi Party of Germany. We all know that one. The military fascism of Japan at that time, as well as Mussolini in Italy at that time. But any kind of the military-industrial complex in the U.S. is fascism. It's military fascism. Fascism is basically when there's a supreme ruler. The rules are set. You don't question it. You do what you're told. That's fascism. And it doesn't matter what you want as an individual. It's the collective. What's good for the collective. But what is good for the collective from the perspective of who's in charge. Whereas like socialism, the other extreme, far left, which people confuse with people will say, oh, like Obama's like Hitler or this thing. Or Obama's on the left here, heading towards socialism. Socialism that isn't Hitler. Hitler is the other side. That is total control from the top. Socialism is collectivism. So it's what's good for the collective is better for the individual. So it isn't freedom. But at the very least, goods and services are spread equally. So there's equality, but there's not necessarily freedom. You see, that's what socialism is. Whereas fascism, you're not going to be. Fascism is a lot like the monarchy, where essentially there's people in charge, and they have the privileges, and then everyone else is kind of a serf. And that's kind of what America's turning into, if you haven't noticed. And that's what big corporations want. That's why they're colluding with government. When the big corporations collude with government, that's when you get fascism or fascist-like expressions of operation. And that's what's happening here. People are, all you hear is socialism, communism. Let's fear that. Let's look at what's really creeping up on us, which is this fascism. That's a different story we can get into, but not here today. We'll get any deeper into that other than the fact, look out for the fascism, not the socialism. I'm not a fan of socialism either, but fascism, I think, is closer to our doorstep. That's what we're talking about, police states, and again, top-down control and authoritative control without equality. A definite division between the haves and have-nots with very little haves, and that's what we have developed. And groups like Monsanto or companies like Monsanto are making sure this will happen. They're excluding themselves or exempting themselves by influencing certain politicians and lawmakers to enforce these rules. So that kind of snuck in, and not everyone completely understands that. But that, along with the North Korea thing, I think these could serve actually as awakeners. Okay, like I said, but who knows? On the horizon of awakening as well, though. Like I mentioned, way back in May of 2012, when we had the eclipse, this solar eclipse that started this whole information opening up kind of theme that is finishing up here in April. Okay, with Jupiter finishing up its trek through Gemini. In fact, Jupiter will be done with Gemini here in late June when it enters Cancer. So this whole expansion of information, which is what Jupiter and Gemini is about, it ends here in the next couple of months. But especially April, with the finishing up of what has been building since the summer. Well, one of the things that's been building specifically, we want to talk specifically, is actually the Serious Disclosure Project. And when I say serious, I mean SIRIUS, Serious Disclosure. And what is his name? Greer. I can't think of his first name, but anyway, Dr. Greer. He is one of the foremost experts on the UFO phenomena in the U.S. And I mentioned the UFO phenomena back in May of 2012 because that eclipse went right over Roswell, right over Area 51, right over Mount Shasta, all of these places associated with UFOs on some level. Whether or not these unidentified flying objects are of terrestrial origin, again, military technologies, or actual extraterrestrials. It's a different story, but Dr. Greer is one of the experts in deciphering of this, okay? And again, in my opinion, most of what has gone on since World War II with UFOs and everything has been more military operations, more, and that's my opinion. And Dr. Greer, I've listened to some of his stuff. He tends to agree with me on that level. But anyway, he has a new documentary coming out here on April 22nd, Monday, April 22nd. So 2 weeks from this Monday. This Monday is the 8th. 2 weeks from this Monday will be April 22nd, the world premiere in LA of the Serious Disclosure Project. So this is one example, and it's specific to this idea of the secrets coming out, government secrets coming out, whatever they are, to the degree that it's going to be able to spread to more people in a more believable way, without looking conspiracy-ish. Because again, we've all been indoctrinated to invoke the word conspiracy and to fear it as something that's going to, cause our exclusion from the group or something. If we entertain thoughts that might be considered conspiracies to the mainstream, okay? Whether or not they are. And a conspiracy isn't necessarily something that isn't true that you believe in. It's something that's going on secretly that may or may not be true. It's a theory until it's proven true. But I think most of us know there is something. There are objects flying around. People aren't seeing nothing that are witnessing these things. So there is some truth to this, and we're going to find out a little bit more. This project is going to disclose a whole lot more than has ever been out. And the way they're doing this and promoting this is really interesting. I won't get into the details, but they're using the internet combined with different other social media to really make sure that this doesn't get squashed, doesn't get looked at because you're going to see Yahoo News and your local broadcast news talk about it potentially just to bring it out there and make fun of it and call it a conspiracy and call Dr. Greer a conspiracy theorist and all that. And of course, it's up to you to use your own discretion as far as what you believe. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and tell you what is true and what isn't, but the idea being, watch out for that backlash. I feel like this is going to be very popular, this outpouring, and it will be popular enough to make the mainstream news as something, but only to kind of brush it off, only to say, oh yeah, look at this. Oh, and in other news, and get on to something else. So look out for that, okay? Look out for that, especially if you still watch the news. I personally don't watch the local news anymore, or even national. I can't get back to that. I try to, and it looks like a joke to me at this point. And I always advise people, take 30 days off from the news. Just 30 days, come back to it. And you're gonna wonder how you ever just totally sat down and completely took in what you've always taken in. Because you start to see, once you disconnect from that and connect to kind of your own truth for a little while, and you come back to it, you really start to understand, feel like you're being jolted with information that doesn't feel right, that doesn't quite jive with you. It's as if your blue pill, again, the Matrix, you haven't taken it in a while. And when you don't take the blue pill for a while, things start to wear off. You don't necessarily have to take the red pill that requires you to never go back, but just stopping taking the blue pill is enough. And that's why the news is designed the way it is. It's just constant flux of fear-based energy. And that's why this North Korea thing right now, it's just all over, push, because it wants to get you hyped up, kind of like things were in the 1950s and early 1960s when there was a whole lot more reality to that nuclear tension, the whole arms race and things blown out of proportion. But it was also the media that was creating that. Okay, more so than anything else, that paranoia was more driven by the fear in the media. Not that there wasn't some real thing going on, but it was certainly amplified with that aspect. And so that kind of thing's going on again. I would advise not falling for it. I heard it the first time and I said, really? It didn't feel right, okay? And I'm trying to every time I hear it, I'm like, it still doesn't feel right. There's something about the North Korea thing, whether or not there is some truth to it, the actual threat doesn't seem to be real, okay? And you can disagree with me all you want, but that's just the way I feel about that. And I also feel like this Monsanto thing was a sneak, okay? But then going back to this alien thing that's coming out, or not alien, but UFO thing, that potential, I'm curious to see how much Dr. Greer leans toward the alien side of the UFO phenomenon myself. I think there might be something there. I have no idea. but I certainly believe that there's some technologies that are being hidden from us. And that's the most important part about this disclosure. Isn't necessarily that, oh, the government lied to us about UFOs and has technology, but that we have technology for energy available now, and have for decades, have since World War II, and can get off of oil and things like this. But when you look at the history, you understand, like the Rockefeller Foundation, for example, essentially established what we now know as the military-industrial complex in the U.S. in 1956, and this was the start. Once the Rockefeller Foundation, which is big oil, basically, where big oil started, and the Bush family is into this, obviously, and getting off oil obviously isn't in the best interest of those fascists behind the scenes that are actually controlling the government and everything, that we're not in tune with on some level, but which is coming out now a little bit more to more and more people. But we've been kept in the dark with technology, and that's the biggest thing to come out of this disclosure, in my opinion, is the idea that there are existing technologies that exist. Free energy technologies of certain kinds that I'm not going to get into details of. They exist and have existed and can be used today. And just imagine the prospects of that, because of how much is, how many people are deprived of basic needs simply because of lack of energy. And you just throw in energy, and all of a sudden you solve so many problems. It's insane. Like even something like water, for example, water shortages. There's only so much fresh water in the world. And it is more, people think, well, the world is 80% water. How can we have a water issue? Well, only 1% of that is fresh water that's usable. So there is, and especially when you start getting local and regional, there can be pretty limited supplies of that fresh water. Okay, and so there's a bit of a misunderstanding there in the general population about the abundance of water. But you might say, well, water desalination, I think I said it right. That's where you take the salt water from the ocean and desalinate it and turn it into fresh water for drinking and agriculture and whatever else. Now, the argument against that has always been that it takes too much energy, it's too expensive. Okay, but now you add this free energy into the equation, and all of a sudden, desalination doesn't seem like such an expensive prospect anymore. It's not so costly for energy because energy isn't going to run out, essentially. You see, and so now water does become abundant. That's less of an issue. Imagine if energy and water aren't an issue, then providing local agriculture and organic foods to local communities and everything will be a whole lot easier in many different areas. So you don't have to rely on big agriculture and things that companies like Monsanto bank on. The idea of big ag, and controlling the food industry from the top down, and as big as possible to almost control what goes into our bodies. So free energy, it'll free up water, it'll free up food, and a host of other things, and possibly free up more leisure time for the average person, depending on how we look at it. So there's no limit to how far this can really go. And so to know that the government has been hiding, or that the world governments have been hiding existing technologies that could help free us, that to me is more important than even if there are aliens and whatnot, who cares? Let's just start using the technology, Let's just start using the energy technology we have, whether or not it came from terrestrial sources or extraterrestrial sources, doesn't really matter. But let's use it. Let's put it to practice. Let's free ourselves. But again, the big corporations colluding with big governments, and the governments all kind of colluding together in the world, the new world order, and I won't get into that either. But the idea that we're heading toward this kind of global governance, and that global governance is kind of backed and pushed by the big corporations. So again, we have this almost like a world fascist government setting up if we let it, whereas we could have more of a conscious liberty movement. All right there. Well, sorry about that. I got cut off. I didn't know I got cut off. I went on for another 10 minutes or so. Didn't realize I got cut off there. Forgot to erase the old videos and ran out of room in the memory. So, my bad. Anyway, so we're back in my apartment to finish this up. And what I wanted to do was this. I think it cut me off right around the idea of the big corporations colluding with all the world governments and that being turning into what is resembling at least a fascist almost regime on a global level, enforcing us to be using oil when perhaps other technologies are out there that might be brought to our awareness in a more grounded fashion here as we get into mid to late April, which is interesting. And what I wanted to finish off with was what's happening here in late April. In late April, we have the final, we have a lunar eclipse, which is going to occur in the sign of Scorpio, okay? And so along with the new moon in Aries here, April 10th, next Wednesday, on April 25th, the same week, just 3 days after the Serious Disclosure Project comes out, so within the realm of the lunar eclipse energy, within the orb, I should say, we have this disclosure happening when we have a lunar eclipse, full moon. All full moons have to do with culminations of what's been building. And so here we have something that's been building for months. They've been building this project for months. And it's going to be, the premiering here, April 22nd. And so this goes back to the idea of the eclipses back in May and June of 2012. And like I said, that eclipse that went over Roswell and Area 51 and all that, specifically, this is that conspiracy theory for UFOs and government cover-ups and stuff like that. So it's interesting that this is specifically dealing with that topic of the UFOs and the government and everything else, and these secret government locations, etc., and what could come of that. Because when that solar eclipse went over that in May of 2012, it signified this almost like opening the door, opening the doorway. And what a full moon in Scorpio in general means, and when you make it a lunar eclipse, it just intensifies it. But Scorpio energy is, again, related to Pluto and the 8th house, which is about revealing the truth, okay? And so we have something, like a door opens here last May with that eclipse, specifically over those areas of government secrecy. And here we are in late April, and we have the premiere of a documentary that's going to really dig in to this issue the same week as this lunar eclipse, which signifies specifically the truth coming out and then culminating in some way. So, wow. I mean, how perfect is that? That's the way astrology works a lot of times. So I really think, and especially because this lunar eclipse, the moon will be on the north node and tied with Saturn. So this is really about grounding into reality and really deciphering and distinguishing between reality and fantasy, or in other words, reality and conspiracy theory. So conspiracy theory versus conspiracy reality, because a conspiracy isn't necessarily something that isn't real. It's just something that's secret. Okay, it can be real. And so I think this documentary is really going to distinguish some things, and especially because on the other end of the eclipse, the other side of a full moon is always the sun, but with the sun will be Mars. And so Mars and the sun are going to be in Taurus with the south node, the other side of the eclipse again. So in Taurus is that earthy energy. It's like what we're used to. It's the status quo. Okay? And specifically when we talk about energy, because like I said, the most important thing about this disclosure isn't the UFO or alien phenomena, but it's the technology that's been hidden by the governments. The world government's hiding technology that could potentially free the populace on a worldwide level, which could lead to all kinds of freedom, like I said before. So, and that's something that a world fascist government wouldn't want, would they? If the corporations that are in charge of that government and the policies and everything want to control the markets, especially if these markets are for oil. And when we look at specifically the Rockefellers, for example, the oil tycoons that started it all, the Rockefeller Foundation was behind the formation of the military-industrial complex in 1956, as we know it in the U.S. And this would be where the cover-up would be happening. And why would they be covering this up? this technology up to keep oil as our status quo oil, or our status quo energy source, all right? And there's a Taurus energy. There's that Mars in Taurus. It's like, this is the way I've always done it, so I'm going to keep doing it. And this eclipse energy that we have in late April, which is, again, basically like when we have eclipses, it's a time period, these happen every 6 months or so. They're time periods of like shifting train tracks. And we have 2 more eclipses coming up in May 9th and May 24th, 25th. We'll talk about that next month. But the idea being that this time period, where we are here in early April, we're going to be on a different track by early June. Okay? So things are shifting personally and collectively. And on the collective level, you could definitely see how this could be an awareness time where the truth really comes out when it's distinguished. And combined with this Aries energy we have right now, remember we have this Venus-Mars energy right now as we speak, this weekend, the weekend of the 6th and 7th, and ending around the 8th or so. But that builds up to the new moon here Wednesday, April 10th in Aries. Okay? And all this Aries, fiery Aries energy, this could be an ignition point, okay, on a collective level. And so personally and collectively, we're ignited to start something new. We're inspired to start something new. Like, let's do it now. What are we waiting for? And combined with this sort of truth coming out energy of that Scorpio lunar eclipse later in the month, it really is a time of like, now that we know, what are we waiting for? Do you see? You combine the energy. It's this whole combination of, now that we know, let's just do it now. Like, if we have this technology, like, come to my home and switch out my technology right now. Come to my car and switch out this technology right now. Like, there's a sense of impatience. So impatience is a pretty strong theme this April. It typically is with the Aries energy in April in general, but this Aries in particular is a lot of this sense of urgency. Like, we've got to move now, okay? So look for that. Look for that collectively. Look for that personally, too. And make sure you stand your ground. That's going to be the challenge here, is to stay grounded, because with like, there could be, again, this pulse for rapid change. And if you're not grounded, you can get caught up in the flood. And a full moon lunar eclipse is like a flood energy in a lot of ways. And so, watch out for that. Watch out for the sense of like the flood of truth and it changing everything. And because it changes everything, we want to change everything right away. It's kind of like finding out you didn't have the best, you thought you had the best technology, like the best TV, and then you find out, oh, I didn't get the best one. Now I want the best one, or whatever. But on a more, significant level than just a TV or something like that. But watch. This is going to be a really exciting period. I think it's really interesting that that Sirius Disclosure Project happens the same week as that eclipse. It's no coincidence to me. I've been doing this astrology thing for a while. I get how it works. So I'm just kind of looking forward to see how it all unfolds. But that's not the only thing. There's other things that'll come out too. So be aware of other truther movements on the horizon. And that truther movement may be the trigger that opens up other ones. Like, people suddenly say, well, if that stuff was true and always hidden, and it was managed to be hidden, maybe there's other stuff that I've always assumed was conspiracy might have some truth to it too. And it's going to open the doorway for other truther movements. Other, like, even going back to like old conspiracy question marks, like the Kennedy assassination, or even, there were even, like, in the 1930s, there were people that were suing the big companies that profited during World War I, basically saying that the only reason why we went into World War I was for a profit. This was way before people had the internet and the ability to, like, get alternative information. This was before all these big corporations and the people, the head honchos with the money and the bankers really had a grip on the media. They were still trying to get a grip on the media at that point. They had some claws on it at that point, but it wasn't really until the end of this last century, here in the 80s and 90s, leading up to this first decade of the 21st century, that essentially our media is not what a media should be, especially in a free market society. We essentially get one piece of information through many sources instead of many sources of information to decipher from. It really should be up to the media to give us information from which we as individuals decide for ourselves what our own conclusions are, if we come to conclusions at all. Okay? But the way our media is set up is interesting, because no matter what channel you turn on, it's the same narrative, the same story, and essentially the conclusions are already drawn as far as what happened. Like if you remember on 9/11, the day of 9/11, it's like everyone just knew it was Osama bin Laden and Al Qaeda, and it was like, how in my mind I remember thinking, how is this already known? But obviously the media outlets were already told what to say, and so like again, when it comes to truther movements, we're going to see maybe the 9/11 truthers coming out and things like that. So look for a lot of truther movements to just open up and just start pouring through now, especially with the Serious Disclosure Project, unleashing some real, for the first time, some solid information, some solid distinctions, some grounded distinctions between reality and fantasy with regards to UFOs, aliens, and hidden technologies that really could free us. And so this is going to be, I think, an eye-opening kind of time period, an awakening time period. And on a personal level, just watch again. Stay grounded, because it is a time that we're going to want to shift really quickly. There's no patience here. So, with that, just understand what energies we're in and how they might apply to you, and just be ready. This is exciting. May is going to be really intense too. We'll get to that next month. But as for now, I apologize again for having to come back from my sacred grove out there in the median and back in my apartment to kind of switch the energy up. But I wanted to finish this up for you anyway. So until next time, thanks a lot and enjoy these April showers. Bye-bye.